Robin Sharma is quoted as saying, "Time management is life management. The way you manage your time is the way you manage your life." Let's talk about time management on today's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. All right, welcome to the Playing with a Purpose podcast, where we explore topics related to the moral development of collegiate athletes and young people as it pertains to character, responsibility, and purpose. I'm your host, Matt Barker, and today I'm excited to have Freed-Hardeman Instructor of Business, Miss Amy Sewell, with me on today's program. Amy, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. Been looking forward to this one. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about Amy. This might make it a little easier. She was even, I have to say this about Amy, she was on time. We're talking about time management. She was here 5 minutes early, and she even had a little bit of an introduction I can read for her. So this is like no other guest has had this for me. So this is great. I love it. And it also makes sure I get everything right. Sometimes I look up information and I don't always know if it's accurate. So I know for a fact information is true. Amy is an instructor in the College of Business here at Freed-Hardeman. She teaches business communication and personal finance to hundreds of students each year. She also coordinates FHU's academic program in personal financial planning, which prepares students for careers as certified financial planners to help people manage their money and meet their financial goals. Amy sees a lot of similarities between managing time, managing money, something we will talk a lot about today. Amy's a graduate of Harding University, where she studied public administration. She spent the first 9 years of her career on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. After 8 years as director of consumer media relations for the Direct Marketing Association, she left to start her own consulting business. Over 17 years, she represented dozens of Fortune 500 companies as their spokesperson on more than 2,000 live TV interviews, and she joined the faculty here at Freed-Hardeman in 2021. A lot of interesting things you've been able to do in your career. Tell me a little bit about your career, and if those of you that maybe don't know, our listeners, the times that you see people on the Today Show, Good Morning America, when they have people introducing products and marketing different things that businesses want them to market, that was you. You were the person that did that. So tell us a little bit about that and how interesting of a career that was for you.
Well, that was something I never intended to do. But during those years I was working for the Direct Marketing Association, part of my job became going out and just promoting a lot of the retailers that were members of the association. And during that time, there was this brand new thing called internet shopping that people were really uncomfortable with. So it became my job to go out and encourage people to do it and show them it was safe and secure to do so. And after doing that, I started to see there was a business opportunity for me just to go out and start my own company representing people on my own. So that's what I did. Yeah,
awesome. And so, we talk a lot about with college students in particular, and we talk a lot about student athletes on this podcast, but really student athletes are just college students that play a sport. So there's not really much difference there as far as that goes. But as far as the time management, we talk a lot about these athletes, regardless of what school you go to, they're very busy. So time management is an important topic to discuss. And this is something that you have a lot of experience with the classes that you've taught. And we talk a little bit about financial planning. That's a whole nother podcast. I might have you on for season 2, because I have a whole nother episode on how not only athletes, but just students in general can plan financially. That's a big part of it, and make plans for that. Tell me a little bit about how some of the teaching those classes, how much of that overlaps with time management and things as well.
Oh, it does tremendously. And one of the things that when we think about time management, there's a lot in the popular media about it. People see things on social media. And for so many years, time management was all about how much can I fit into as little time as possible?
Right.
And the whole notion of it was, hey, I need to schedule every minute and follow that. And if I don't follow that, I'm a failure.
Yeah.
Well, when that's the approach, we set ourselves up to fail. I think over the years, what has happened now is there's a recognition that that really doesn't work. And that what we want to make sure we do instead is just make sure we have time to do all the things that need to get done.
Yeah.
And that's become more and more difficult because of so many things competing for our attention. It's not just about the phones that we carry in our bags or our pockets every day, but that's a big part of it because that introduces so much opportunity for distraction, and both externally as well as distracting ourselves. But it's interesting, people tend to view the whole notion of time management as something that's very restrictive. Like someone's going to tell me I can't do something. It's kind of like dieting or budgeting. Someone uses those terms, okay, someone's going to tell me I can't do something that I want to do.
To really watch what I'm eating, and all that stuff.
And I can't buy what I want to buy. But instead, might want to flip the script a little bit. If we look at time management or budgeting as things that we're being proactive about, we're taking control of our time. That liberates us to be able to do the things that we need to do rather than, use somebody else's definition of, I just need to fit as much as possible into my day.
Yeah.
Time and money have a lot of similarities in that way. These are also two things that we can either spend them or we can invest them. So we can spend them on things that may or may not have a lot of lasting value, or we can invest them in things that are going to pay dividends both for ourselves and for other people. And viewing time as the finite resource that it is can encourage us to really take control of it and be very intentional about how we're using it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one of the first questions I was going to ask you kind of touched on that a little bit, is how would you define effective time management? I think it does go back to this limiting those distractions, but also this looking a little bit more long term. When you think about how you're spending your time, that might be a little short term, and how you're thinking about how you're going to use your time. But investing, that's this whole long term. How is it going to help me in the future? Which kind of goes back to this idea as far as how we manage our time. If we have that mindset, then we're always looking, how is this going to help me prepare for something, and not necessarily short term. So I really like that definition. And that goes back to this character development as well, which we talk a lot about on this podcast. If you're thinking long term and how my behavior and the things that I do, how that is preparing me long term, then it's not just like, how can I get this done right now? It's more about focusing on the future. And I think that's a very good way of looking at it. Second thing I was wanting to talk about, in your experience, you've taught obviously hundreds of students, and a lot of those may be athletes, right? There's probably in the classes I teach, probably in a classroom we'll have 30 students, maybe, close to 5 to 10 of those might be athletes and in some sport. So in your experience, how have you seen the demands of sports impact the time management skills of these athletes?
Well, I have to tell you, I love having athletes in class, and a very large percentage of them are business majors. So in any given class, I might have a third of them might be intercollegiate athletes. Others maybe they were athletes in high school, or some other time maybe they don't currently play. But I love having them in class because they understand that hard work produces results.
Yeah.
So, and that you don't necessarily get those results overnight. So, if you're an athlete who's playing intercollegiate basketball or baseball, you didn't just start playing last year. This is something you've been doing since you were 5, 6, 7 years old. And you know that over the years, the more work you put in, there's some patience that comes with that too.
Yeah.
But that pays off. And most athletes that I have experienced tend to take that same approach to their classes. So one of the things that makes them really good at time management is that they recognize they have to manage their time well.
Yeah.
There's a saying, of course, if you want to get something done, give it to someone who's busy. Well, someone who has a busy schedule and has a lot of responsibilities has to manage it well. So they manage their responsibilities on the athletic side, and they tend to take that same approach to their coursework as well.
Yeah, and one of the things I was looking up with as far as how to manage time effectively, specifically with student athletes, this whole responsibility aspect, they'd mentioned taking ownership of your commitments. And it kind of goes back to this accountability. Like, people that are busy, like you mentioned, they have a lot more organization a lot of times on how they manage their time, and they're thinking about it a little bit more strategically than people that maybe are not as good with time management. So it allows you to kind of take ownership of the things that you're doing, and it helps you to stay accountable. And if you have a coach that's constantly on you, you have to be here at this time and you need to make sure you're going to class and doing all this. Those athletes, it's like you said, they have a leg up on a lot of other people because they've already had to do this throughout their whole life. It's not the first time they've kind of entered this college environment and they've had to manage academics and athletics, because they've had to do this in high school as well. They've had to a smaller extent, do this already. So it's interesting to think about how, and I've heard this from a lot of other coaches I've talked to. It's like, this is preparing them for a lot of life experiences. Have you seen where it kind of helps prepare them a little bit for things after college, even with the things they're learning here, how it kind of transpires into future as well?
It absolutely prepares them. And it's interesting that they don't always recognize that right away. In the business communication class that I teach, we do a lot of work on resumes and interviewing skills and that type of thing. And, students who are athletes have a tremendous competitive advantage over other students if they choose to seize that. They know how to work in teams. They can work in difficult situations. They know what it's like to need to pull together with a group of people to reach a goal. They've learned how to trust other people. Other people can depend on them because that's just a normal part of their life. They are coachable.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who want to learn, they want to grow. They know how to work with people from different backgrounds. They're not afraid to take risks. They have really good interpersonal skills. And these are things that for people who are playing at this level, that's just what they've always done. And they don't necessarily think of those as skills that are going to be attractive to employers. That's especially true, I think, because so many of them may have grown up. They've always been encouraged and praised for their sports accomplishments.
Yeah.
But they may not have gotten encouragement on other things. And it's always exciting for me to work with athletes who maybe they have tremendous confidence on the baseball field or on the basketball court. And they come into class, and when they put a resume together, they don't have any of that on there.
Yeah.
And as we start to talk through it, you can just see the confidence increase because they have that confidence in a ball game. But in other places, they may have not been encouraged yet on it. And once they realize, hey, these are things that employers really value and they set you apart, they become much more excited kind of in thinking about how they're going to articulate that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting because I've had a lot of athletes in class too, and you see them one way on the court or field when they're playing, and they're just so different in class. Sometimes they're maybe not as confident, and that's just because maybe they're not as comfortable in that environment. And there's one athlete in particular, I won't mention his name, but he's a basketball player. I had him in speech class his first year, very quiet, reserved, and the first time I saw him, he was freshman of the year. I'm kind of giving away who he is here, and he's just so vocal on the court, and he's getting the crowd pumped up, moving his arms up and down, and you're like, man, I did not see this side of this guy. So sometimes they don't automatically have that confidence. But do you have one of the questions I was going to ask you is, have you seen any success stories of any students that maybe you've had where when you first met them, they didn't have some of this confidence that maybe academically, but then by the end of the semester, you really saw them transform and, seeing how they can use some of those athletic skills for their careers even?
I'll tell a couple of stories. Again, I used to teach a section of the freshman speech class here.
Yeah.
I don't do that anymore, but I would get a lot of people like you just mentioned. But it's exciting, like in the business communication class, you see athletes who maybe they aren't quite as confident on the academic side, even though they're very talented. We do a lot of group projects, group presentations.
Yeah.
And you see them step up and take leadership. It's just a natural thing for them to do.
Yeah.
But seeing them do that in the classroom, you see them immediately transferring those skills. We talk about how those skills are so valuable to employers. We have a student who's a finance major right now. He's an athlete, and he was out pursuing a corporate finance internship for this summer. And one of the qualifications for that internship was, they really wanted someone who already had some internship experience and had some exposure. But having the hustle that he did, he just went ahead and went for it anyway. He got the internship. It's with a major manufacturing company. And they said what the difference was, they saw that he was an athlete. And they knew that someone who had that background that he had would have all those qualities that they would have expected maybe someone with internship experience previously to have developed. So it's exciting
that's
just
awesome.
Story after story like that where you see people who are able to go out and leverage that experience that they have.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the things we talk a lot about on this podcast is character development and how you develop character. And I think a lot of times how you manage your time is one of the factors in how your character is shaped as well. So when we think about time management, sometimes this means athletes or just students in general have to say no to certain things, right? They have to make sure they're keeping their priorities in line, and athletes especially, they have to make sure that they're surrounding themselves with the right people, not just that's looking out for them athletically, but also this is some things you need to think about for your future as well outside of athletics. So how can the skill of learning time management help students make better moral choices as well, especially in environments where there's a lot of pressure, external expectations are very high, especially athletes, they have a lot that's expected of them. How can making sure they're managing their time effectively help them maybe even morally?
Well, the ability to say no, it's becoming probably one of the most valuable time management skills.
Yeah.
Now, people who are more advanced in their careers and have more experience have the ability to say no to a lot more things than someone who's a student or maybe someone who's new is. But the interesting thing, we always have time to do the things we want to do.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting how that works out.
Yeah.
But it's all those other things that sometimes we find it a little more difficult to prioritize. There's a time management researcher and expert by the name of Laura Vanderkam who said, I don't have time means it's not a priority.
Yeah.
So, we always find time to do those other things. So, when it comes to what you say no to, there are some things that obviously are obvious no's. There are things, you've made a decision in your life. You're going to live a life of integrity.
Right.
You have certain morals and values that you're going to live by. Hopefully, we just make that decision once.
Yeah.
So that once we make that decision, it's very easy to say no to a lot of other things and, not compromise who we are. With other things, sometimes we just end up with what could be very overloaded calendars. And having an ability to kind of look at that and say, well, what's really important? Sometimes you need to ask a coach or somebody else, say, hey, help me prioritize here. But knowing who you are and being able to look at something and say, does this align with my values? Is something like this going to move me in the direction I want to go? Is it going to help me accomplish something? Or is it something that, yeah, it might be nice to do, but I just really don't have time when I have 18 other things that are demands on my time.
And it kind of goes back to this next question I was going to ask you. You kind of answered that already, as far as what any advice that you would give to athletes about handling expectations that are from the university, from their coaches, whatever. I think it goes back to these core values. If you have that early on, what's something that you hold as who you are and who you want to be, then it helps some of those decisions you answer that question yourself, because if it doesn't align with my core values or the things that I think is good to do, then maybe I need to say no to this, and maybe I need to manage my time differently if it's not aligning with who I am. Right? So I think it goes back to that, but the difficult part is knowing those core values, right? What is the things I need to make sure I'm doing? And it goes back to this next question I had about coaches and mentors, right? The reason sometimes, people know how they should do things is because they've been taught a certain way, whether that's family, parents, mentors, and sometimes early on, a lot of these athletes that we see here in college, they've had coaches all their life. They've played from an early age. So what role do you think coaches and mentors play in helping student athletes develop these strong time management skills and maybe just knowing what their core values are as well?
Well, they absolutely play an essential role, said from the time they're young. And of course, other people, factor in that as well with teachers and parents and other mentors. But in all those people, coaches' roles and as teachers, our roles, we are here to challenge students and really push them to be the best they can be, but also give the encouragement and the tools that they need to be able to do that. If all a coach does is go out there and just challenge and push and push and push people without giving them the support and the tools they need to do it, that's not going to be all that helpful. The same thing for me as an instructor. I need to be able to do all three things here. So, the good coaches and teachers and mentors don't help people avoid difficult situations. We're not here to help them avoid stress. But you want to challenge people so that they can develop the skills they need, that they can stretch beyond what they think they can do. And as some of my students say, one of the things that is good for them is like, I need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah. Because that helps me grow and that helps me learn. So, there's a saying that's attributed to a lot of different people. I don't know who actually said it, was that whether or not you think you can do it, you're right. Yeah. And, instilling in people, yes, you can do things, and then giving them the tools and encouragement they need. It's obviously a significant role that coaches and mentors and teachers and others play with students.
So what are some common struggles that you've seen athletes and just students in general face as far as time? And maybe a two-part question here. What are some common time management struggles you see? And then maybe what are some strategies students can use to maybe overcome those challenges?
Well, I think first, for a lot of athletes, you have the kind of that constant balance between these are my responsibilities with my sport, these are my responsibilities in the classroom. And the really strong ones recognize that, that sports do not take precedence. They recognize, as you say, they're student athletes, first and foremost. And those who recognize that first and foremost they're in college to get an education, that's really important for them. Very few of them, would say they think they're just being paid to play, through a scholarship. Yeah. But ultimately, hopefully they're going to recognize, hey, they're here playing because someone who cares about them has made scholarship funds available to give them an education, and they're able to play their sport while they do it. So, but like I said, most athletes, they're pretty good with managing that. I think the coaches at Freed-Hardeman are very good in terms of emphasizing with their athletes. It's like your class responsibilities cannot fall by the wayside because of your sport. And they're very good. We have players who are doing their homework at 3 a.m. on a bus.
We get emails from them all hours of the night.
Getting it done. They're getting it done. It's like, I'm so sorry to email you at 4 a.m. It's like, well, I'm asleep, but you're welcome to email me.
I'll check it the next
anytime.
morning. Yeah.
Exactly. So the thing is, like all students, they also have a lot on their plates, and all of these things are served up by people who aren't coordinating with each other. Right. So they may have 10 things they need to get done at once. There's a constant mix of new things coming at them, and there are a lot of deadlines. I think that's pretty good training for the real world. Yeah. Because that's the way the real world works. But the interesting thing is, though, in college, most of those things are scheduled. Yeah. So at the beginning of a semester, you can look at your syllabus and you can look at your class schedule on Canvas and say, okay, this is when everything's due, and I can manage it. That's a real luxury that students have in college that you don't get once you graduate
Yeah.
and you're out on the job, where just a lot of stuff is flying at you and it's needed 5 minutes ago. So
Yeah.
I think student athletes do a really good job of managing that because they have to. And I think that's just one of those areas that help them develop a competitive advantage once they're heading out into the workplace
Yeah.
that maybe some other students would not have.
Yeah, again, they have that leg up starting out. They've already had to do this, so they're in a lot of practice in getting this done. But it's like you mentioned, though, they're not always going to have that luxury when they get out of college. So they still have to navigate that whole challenge of, what do I say no to? What can I do in the workplace as far as how many things I can take on at one time? So thinking about how athletes manage their time and how they can do this to not only improve their performance on the court or field or whatever sport that they play, how can they also use time management to develop a deeper understanding of their values, which we talked about earlier, and their overall purpose in life?
Well, I think the phrase time management, I kind of break it down into two different things because I don't really think it's so much anymore about managing a schedule to try to fit everything in, but it's really about managing your focus and managing your attention, because there's plenty of time to do the things that we need to do, but once we're sitting down to do something, oftentimes it's really hard to focus on that.
Yeah.
Because there's so many other things coming at us. And it's not just a phone, just we can distract ourselves in our own mind. So distraction has always been an issue, but there are just a lot more external ones now that come into play. So that involves, you just have to create an environment that is going to enable you to focus and enable you to really focus your attention on what you need to do. The great thing is athletes, again, are at a great advantage in this because they know that you can train.
Yeah.
You develop muscles, you develop skills, and when you focus in on that, you build them. The same thing is true with your brain. The more you practice focus, the better you get at it. The more we allow ourselves to be distracted, the more distractible we become.
Oh, yeah.
So again, athletes, when they understand, you kind of put this in, day by day, week by week, month by month, you start to see your abilities build and improve. And we can do the same thing with attention and focus management as we would with developing athletic skills.
That's interesting. It's all in what we make a priority, right? If we want to improve on something, we can make the time to do it. And if we have that focus, then it's going to help us to achieve those things that we want to do. And you mentioned, like, if you want to get more muscles, you go to the weight room and you work at it. If you want to learn how to effectively manage your time, you can work on that. And it's not something you're going to be great at overnight, but the more time you put into as far as managing your time, going back to those core values that you have and trying to align everything you're doing with those, I think that's a good start. That's a good point. Anything else you can think of with time management that would be beneficial to our listeners, student athletes, coaches, mentors, all those things?
I think two quick things. First of all, I think there's a lot of popular discussion out there about, and I think students expect that somehow there's some magical work-life balance that they can find. And it's just not possible.
Yeah.
Work-life balance is a myth. And I think that we do students and others a disservice when we try to explain to them, oh, you just need to go out and find this and life will be great. Again, athletes have an advantage because they know that overall, in the course of our lives, we can have a good work-life balance that enables us to do the things that are important to us. So we can get the things done that need to be done when they need to get done. But life is seasonal, and athletes know that. So, during the postseason tournament, that's pretty much all you're focused on. Or whenever it's final exam week, that's what they're focused on. When you get married, when you have a baby, it's like that's all you're focused on.
Different priorities, different times of life.
Life is seasonal, so just having a well-ordered life where we make sure that things get the attention when they need it. And, we can focus on other things when those maybe aren't quite as important. Over the course of our lives, we can do that, but on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, I think we do people a disservice by telling them somehow that this is possible to do. But finally, again, just to reiterate, student athletes have a great advantage when they're heading out into the workplace and being very intentional about, when they're crafting their resumes and when they're thinking about job interviews, thinking about how they can translate those skills into something that is going to be useful for their employers is going to give them a tremendous advantage when they're heading out there and starting to embark on those careers.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you said, and I appreciate it, is, this isn't something that we're perfect at. There's always going to be things that take up our time and different seasons of our life where things might have to take over a little bit. And we're constantly learning how to navigate that. That's true for college students and for adults, right? And sometimes more so for adults because we don't have as structured of an environment. We all have to learn throughout our life, everything that comes at us, we have to figure out what things need our time, what times maybe we need to say no to things. And that's just a challenge that everybody has to deal with. Every stage of our life, every season of our life, we have to deal with this. So yeah, that's a good point. We're never going to be at a time where we can just say, yep, we've got this down and it's perfect. We're constantly learning, and it's not something we're ever going to be perfect at, and it's just a learning process. So, all right. Well, I appreciate your time today, Amy. I know that you're a very busy person as well, so I appreciate you taking the time. And it's interesting when I start scheduling these podcasts out, I usually try to do this a few months out, and you usually know your schedule pretty well, and you're like, I can do it, but it'll probably have to be after March, and once I get done with this. And so we were able to get you in here, so I really appreciate that. Hopefully, maybe I can get you on for season 2 to talk about some financial planning. I think that's really beneficial to student athletes as well as just students in general. How can you prepare not only time management, also financial planning as well? That's a big part of it. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us for this week's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. Special thanks again to Amy Sewell for being my guest this week. Be sure to check out this episode and future episodes on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also catch the Playing with a Purpose podcast on the Ministry League Podcast Network, on the Freed-Hardeman Champions of Character website at gofhulions.com/champions of character, and on the NAIA Champions of Character website at naia.org/champions of character. Join us for our next episode as I talk with FHU Bible professor Matt Sokolowski on the topic of ethical decision making. And remember, winning isn't just about the scoreboard, it's about the character we build along the way. We'll see you next time on the Playing with a Purpose podcast.